Put on your big boy flippers, kids, because we're about to dive deep into the cinematic origin story of everyone's favorite water boy not played by Adam Sandler, Aquaman. Yep, Jason Momoa's star turn gave us a pop culture extravaganza and helped revitalize the whole DCEU. So, did James Wan's flick leave you satisfied like a 5-star lobster dinner with Cheddar Bay biscuits to spare? Or were you left in the cold like a 10-day-old shrimp cocktail platter? Well, if you've got some lingering questions, we've got some lingering answers. We here at ScreenRant will try to fill in the gaps and plot holes that are big enough to shove Neptune's trident straight on through. Join us as we jump the shark. How is Arthur so powerful? First and foremost, where do all of Arthur's powers come from? It's not like he's spent his entire life in Atlantis training with the strongest, most powerful Atlanteans. This guy grew up in a freaking lighthouse, for Neptune's sake. Sure, Jason Momoa cuts a strong and imposing figure, and we believed him as the Call of Calls during Game of Thrones' first season, but the character of Aquaman comes a long way in one movie. In his favor, he's the son of Nicole Kidman's Atlanna, an exiled royal of Atlantean blood, and he was trained by her loyal servant Volko. Still, that doesn't necessarily explain how a half-breed like himself has the power to overthrow a full-blooded sea person like Orm. It's been implied through years of Aquaman's comic book continuity that Atlanteans are basically like a bunch of supermen underwater. Their powers under the sea rival what Kryptonians might be able to do when given free rein in Earth's atmosphere. If that's the case, shouldn't Arthur Curry only be able to share a portion of Orm's abilities? Like, if he were to swim super fast, it might have been more realistic for Momoa's Aquaman to be a bit more winded. Instead, this guy can kick major dorsal fin and still have enough breath to speak to sea creatures. Why is Arthur the only one who speaks fish? Speaking of speaking, Arthur Curry is basically the Dr. Dolittle of the sea. He can send out animal commands with a tongue as adept at fish speak as Harry Potter is at parcel tongue.
Thanks. Anytime.
Surprisingly, this power is limited to Arthur alone. No other Atlanteans, at least presently, seem to share this gift. For a guy who grew up on the shore, above the surface, and who didn't spend his life immersed in a sunken continent, this is quite the skill. And while we know for a fact that Arthur Curry didn't need Duolingo to translate his literal speech bubbles under the sea, we don't necessarily understand how Aquaman's singular power is possible. Especially since, as we said before, he's only half Atlantean. We guess if your mother looked as ageless as Nicole Kidman's Atlanna, there must be something special flowing through this family's blood. And if no one else can speak to the sea life, how were the Atlanteans able to domesticate all those sea creatures into doing menial tasks for them? Especially that drumming octopus, who is doing okay at keeping time. His Arthur may merely be half Atlantean, but he's all Aquaman. Why didn't Atlanna age? We get it, Nicole Kidman probably has it in her contract to always look 20 years younger than she actually is. Her character, Atlanna, doesn't seem to age throughout the movie, even though we fast forward over 30 years during the film. Her human partner Tom Curry, the lighthouse keeper played by Tamara Django Fett Morrison, grows visibly older himself. Yes, Atlanna returns to Atlantis several years later, after 1985, when Atlantean soldiers came upon her and Tom's lighthouse hideaway. It can't be her Atlantean blood that keeps her youthful, because Volko does physically age during the movie's different time periods. At least they try to smooth out Willem Dafoe's face with special effects during scenes showing Volko's younger days. Maybe it's the fact that Nicole Kidman's Atlanna is a royal, or it just could be that Nicole Kidman just has no wrinkles to digitally remove to begin with. Hopefully the DCEU doesn't go all X-Men on us and have the same famous actors play the same roles over 40 years of history with barely any age makeup to speak of. How do Professor Xavier and Magneto look basically the same between First Class's 1963 and Dark Phoenix's 92? They must have gotten some work done. Why can Mera alone control water? Where do her water-controlling abilities come from? In the movie, it's not really explained, it's just implied that she's the only Atlantean who has achieved this skill. Basically, Mera can draw H2O out of the human body, she can shoot concentrated aqua blasts, and it all comes from her membership in the Atlantean House of Zebel. But her blood relationship to this royal family doesn't necessarily grant her the hydrokinesis power in and of itself. In the comics, Nereus often has the chance to display this power as well, so perhaps perhaps he also possesses it in the movie, but never had the chance to show it off. The point is, in the Aquaman comics, hydrokinesis is a power that is learned, not passed on through blood relations. So Mera and the other members of the Zebel house may all possess the knowledge of water manipulations. They just haven't shared it with the rest of the world, which means that Aquaman may have the chance to learn this in the sequel. Now, if Mera is the only one who can control water in this way, how did Orm create that big wave in the opening of the movie? In the comics, his helmet makes him Ocean Master, giving him control of Earth's water sources. This may be in Orm's possession in the film. It might just never be explicitly stated as such. What's the deal with Orm's war? We get it. Orm, the Ocean Master, has a major beef with his half-brother Aquaman. He's got a big shiny costume, waves around a trident, and waves around literal waves to fight Arthur Curry. But why did Orm even need the support of other kingdoms to start his war? So much effort is spent on getting support from a united front of Atlanteans before going full tilt in an attack on the surface world. But in washing up humankind's garbage on the world's shorelines, isn't he already basically starting his attack? Plus, why is it so hard to get the Atlanteans to unite against the humans? Based on all the polluting we've been doing in the oceans for generations, we have been the arch enemy of sea life for some time. Orm may be a jerk, but when it comes to complaining about Homo sapiens polluting the waterways, he's 100% right. Plus, since Aquaman is half human himself, you'd think that would be more of a knock against him and his claim to the Atlantean throne, but no bother. How did others find the Trident's location without the map? For a movie about an undersea kingdom, there's more globe-trotting and island hopping than your average Bond movie. There's a lighthouse in Maine, a submarine from Russia, a trip to the Sahara, a layover in Sicily, and a couple other detours thrown in for good measure. Once they reach the subterranean sea located near the center of the world, which leads us to the climax. How do the others find the hidden location where the Trident is located without the information Arthur and Mera were given? So much emphasis is placed on the fact that it's impossible to locate, and no one's found it before. Sure, maybe Arthur and Mera were being closely followed, but there were certain paths in their journey that would have been impossible for eavesdroppers to listen in on. The thing is, adding extra exposition to further explain how Orm and his forces rendezvoused with our heroes for a final confrontation would have been way too convoluted. But it would have been nice if the creative team had at least had a better explanation for how the Ocean Master was able to bring his forces down to face Arthur, Mera, Carathan, and the Trench. While we do get a Black Panther-esque battle in which the future of the Atlantean throne rests, the story jumps from point A to point N to get there. What is the Seventh Kingdom? In Aquaman, we're given glimpses or references to most of the Seven Kingdoms and their underwater existence. However, there's a seventh dominion that doesn't really get mentioned. Outside of Atlantis is Zebel, with Mera serving as its heir and arranged to marry Orm as a means to unify the two kingdoms against the surface dwellers. Another closer ally to Atlantis are the fishermen people, whose kingdom is made up of citizens with scales and gills. Deeper underwater lies the kingdom of the brine. Outside of the water, deep in the Saharan desert, lies the Deserters' Kingdom, a place where Atlantean refugees forged Atlan's trident before the sea dried up and became the desert we know today. In a more barren and even less forgiving environment, the creatures in the trench resemble the deepest dwelling aquatic animals. As for the Seventh Kingdom, no one tells us explicitly what it is. We can only assume that it's the sea at the center of the Earth, where Atlan's trident is found. This prehistoric place might be the Lost Kingdom, but outside of the trident, it doesn't offer much opportunity for Orm's war with surface. Why didn't Orvax kill Arthur? Based on how they run things in Atlantis, they have less leniency than those guys in the Temple of Doom. For such an advanced undersea civilization, they tend to like the old way of doing things. Old ways like trial by combat, and wearing suits of armor and monarchies. So with that in mind, why didn't Orvax do what all good old-fashioned kings do, and order that any challenge to his throne be killed off? Soldiers tracked down the lighthouse where Arthur and his parents were living. Atlanna even fought off and neutralized them before deciding to return to her hometown to face her punishment. Naturally, Orvax and Orm were aware of Arthur Curry's existence, so you'd think one of them would try harder to have the boy who would be Aquaman killed. Now, with Volko watching over Arthur, that likely would have made it more difficult, and any Aquaman sequel could probably include a flashback to retcon this lack of judgment on the part of Orvax and son. But until that time, we'll wonder why the movie didn't try harder to show Orvax trying harder to keep Aquaman from ascending to the throne. With Orvax in control, you'd think Arthur would be sleeping with the fishes, but maybe he wasn't so ruthless a king after all. What makes Arthur a worthy king? Look, he may be faster than lightning, but Flipper the Dolphin isn't the king of Atlantis. That job title now belongs to Arthur Curry. The first of his name, the finder of the trident, the son of the lighthouse, lord of the seven kingdoms, wearer of the golden green wetsuit, the undry, and the guy formerly known as Khal Drogo. Jason Momoa definitely looks like a king, and with a first name like Arthur, his story can be crammed full of references to Arthurian legend. But do all Atlanteans support Arthur? He's shown that he is merciful, especially after his battle against ORM'S. Yet he's also a half-breed, which doesn't seem too positive in the eyes of Atlantean purists. We suppose we'll find out about any future challengers to the throne in an Aquaman sequel. Until that time, Arthur Curry will be coasting on his high approval ratings. Face it, the guy's got a powerful entourage of supporters at the moment. Speaking of entourage, he makes a better king of Atlantis than Adrian Grenier would have been. So, all hail King Arthur. It's Arthur Curry's world right now. We're just living in it. What's the deal with the half-fish creatures? As we said before, there's not one, but 7 different kingdoms, and each has their own eccentricities. But with so many humanoid races now added to the DCEU's canon, did Aquaman jump the shark? Literally. How did all of these different mer people, fish people, and crab people form their own crustacean nations? It's assumed that these mythical beasts and odd creatures all at one point came from Atlantis. But if that's truly the case, was Atlantis the only home of these life forms? Because we don't have them anywhere else on Earth. If they evolved from more primitive sea creatures, then their evolution process would have had to have happened over many thousands or millions of years. And if they're some kind of fish-Atlantean hybrid, then we're left with a lot of questions. Like, how do they cohabitate? Did the fish boyfriends and fishy girlfriends teach early Atlanteans how best to live underwater? Were they also the ones who gave Atlanteans their whole scales and trident fashion style? And when is Bravo airing the season premiere of Real Salt Wives of Atlantis? Because we'll take an episode of that while we wait for the sequel. So, you've taken a dip into our video, but there are more questions lurking in the depths of your imagination. Did you struggle to understand the dense complexity that is the Aquaman movie? Let us know in the comments section below. If there's anything we haven't addressed, then hey, we're gonna need a bigger video. Until then, be sure to subscribe to ScreenRant for more wet and wild wacky videos like this one. We'll see you next time. Same fishy time, same fishy channel.